Hi, good afternoon, everyone. This is Mike Roberts from Jujama. I'd like to thank everyone for joining our webinar today. On the call with me today, I have Chris Yochim.
Hi, Mike. I hope you can hear me okay.
I can, Chris. Thank you very much for joining our call. So today, during our call for the webinar, we're going to be going over the secrets for maximizing results at strategic conferences, focusing specifically on JP Morgan. For those of you who don't know Chris is one of our key clients, but he's also a tremendous resource for us here at Jujama. He has over 30 years of industry experience in the biotech industry, and he'll be going through some of his meeting strategy techniques, specifically focusing on the JP Morgan conference that recently took place.
Mike, it's a pleasure to join the call today, and I look forward to sharing my experiences with all the folks that are on the call today.
So Chris, what we're going to do today, and for everyone on the call, before going into your experiences at JP Morgan, I'd like to first just kind of give a little background and overview into our company, Jujama. So as you can see on the slide, Jujama itself has been an industry leader since 2010. And what we do is we provide mobile apps, event technologies, and unparalleled customer support. And some of the conferences that we actually power are 9 state bio associations, as well as Autumn and LES. And I think Chris wants to speak a little bit further upon his experience. He recently attended Autumn, which is one of the events that Jujama had powered.
Yeah, that's right, Mike. My relationship with Jujama dates back several years now when Jujama became the provider of the partnering software at Autumn. Some of the folks on the call may know that I'm very active in academic technology transfer. That was a big part of my business development career at AstraZeneca. And I've been a member of Autumn since the mid-90s, about the same length of time that I've been going to JP Morgan. And when it was quite a task to get the Autumn and the academic committee to understand the importance of having one-on-one partnering at the Autumn annual meeting, and Jujama stepped up several years ago and provided the software for doing that. So that's really how my interaction with Jujama began. However, I think it's worth pointing out that Bob Naismith and I actually go back 35 years. He was CEO of a company there in Scranton, and he was the very first CRO that I ever worked with back when I was a bench scientist in ICI Stewart Pharmaceuticals, which eventually became Zeneca and AstraZeneca. So it's literally one of my oldest relationships in the industry, and I couldn't be happier to be on the call with Bob and Nadia and you, Mike.
And thanks, Chris, and we certainly appreciate you joining the call today. And that's actually a great point. And one of the things we wanted to cover today was not only Jujama's experience basically working in the event technologies and empowering the different state associations, but the background that our company has working in the life sciences. You mentioned your relationship with Bob and Nadia, and just to give the listeners out there some background on our company, the founders of Jujama have worked in the life sciences for decades, and they've created the MedTrack database, which is basically a competitive intelligence database that was focused on the venture finance and life sciences community. So due to this unique collaboration that we decided to do with AstraZeneca and Merck, a product called BioPro Scheduler was born, where we were actually able to do some things for AstraZeneca and Merck. We first were able to essentially streamline their meeting process and scheduling at the JP Morgan conference. And then in addition to that, they've actually come to us with some specific requests that I think Chris could speak about a little bit further as to how BioPro Scheduler was born. And then in addition to that, just some history on our relationship with both AstraZeneca and Merck.
Yeah, I'd like to give equal credit to my business development colleagues at Merck for making this product a success, as well as the programmers and the staff, technical staff at Jujama. With the evolution of the JP Morgan conference over the years, evolving from more than just an analyst and an investor conference to becoming one of the big business development conferences, most of the big pharma companies began sending larger and larger delegations to the event, and it became very cumbersome to organize in a organize participation in an efficient and effective manner. So it just so happened that with the help of Barbara Yanni and Pam Demain at Merck, we sat down after one particularly frustrating JP Morgan and said we need to do something about this. And we got together with Jujama again because of the relationship that I had with them and the awareness of them from my autumn connections. And they went to work building BioPro Scheduler. And I think the unique thing I'd like to point out is that not all big pharmas are alike. Merck had some things that they wanted to do, and AstraZeneca had some things that they wanted to see in their system. And Jujama was very quick and very efficient to adapt the system to meet each of our needs. And we'll talk more in length about it, but also making sure there was sufficient firewalls and privacy and confidentiality so that there was no spillover between the two systems.
And Chris, that's a great point. That's something I wanted to get across to the audience today. Not only has JP Morgan evolved over the years, sending larger and larger delegations, but I wanted to let people know that BioPro Scheduler in itself is a client-driven product. So you could speak a little bit more about this later in the call, but it's something that we've customized, and you could touch upon some of the things that you wanted a little bit differently from Merck and things of that nature. But I wanted to stress to the people on the call that it is something that was client-driven, and it was essentially a solution that was built due to the increase in activity at the JP Morgan conference. Since the introduction of BioPro Scheduler in 2014, we've actually expanded upon our reach to make it into a yearly meeting portal. And as you can see, on top of adding some of the key industry leaders, Merck and AstraZeneca, we've added some other key clients. So it started off as basically a collaboration with Merck and AstraZeneca, and since that collaboration, we've expanded upon it into a yearly meeting portal. So to this date, these are some of our key clients that are using BioPro Scheduler to manage all of their meetings across the board 365 days a year. And Chris, I wanted to also give the audience some background on yourself. I'm sure many of the people on our call today are familiar with you or have probably worked with you in some capacity at some point in time. But I'd like to formally introduce everyone else in the audience that might not be so familiar with your work as to what you've done in the past. As you can see, Chris's resume is quite extensive, which is the reason we felt it would be a perfect person to speak to the audience today upon his meeting experiences. So his career is highlighted by over 30 years working in the biotechnology space. He's worked at AstraZeneca in roles as senior pharmacologist, associate director of strategic planning and business development. And since his retirement from AstraZeneca, he's actually one of their leading forces behind their success at JP Morgan. And this is actually how I began to know Chris, was our relationship working with AstraZeneca at JP Morgan. In addition to his work at AstraZeneca, he's held leadership roles at Autumn, Pennsylvania Bio, and Delaware Bio. And just for some more background on him, his entire career has basically spanned in the big pharmaceutical industry, focusing on academics and biotechs. And he's attended the JP Morgan conference itself since the mid-1990s. So he's the perfect person to speak to, giving everyone an idea of how it started, how it's evolved throughout the years, and how the meeting technology itself has evolved alongside that as well. And Chris, is there anything else you'd like to add to that in addition to what I've said?
Mike, I think you've pretty much covered it there. As I said, it's a pleasure to contribute to bringing people to be aware of this particular tool that's available not only for JP Morgan, but as we'll talk about later on, possibly for some other events where there aren't partnering capabilities. But in the spirit of being completely clear and transparent and proper governance, since I've spent 35 years in a pharma company, I'd just like to issue the safe harbor statement that I am a client of Jujama, or AstraZeneca is a client of Jujama. I'm not being compensated for this today. I'm doing this because they provided a great product. It's something that's of use to the industry, and I just want to be clear that I'm not receiving any compensation of any kind from Jujama to participate in today's webinar.
Chris, we really appreciate that, and that's something we wanted to get across to our audience today, is that BioPro Scheduler itself is a client-driven product, and that's something we want to get across. And we work with clients like Chris and all of our other key clients in order to, make improvements. We listen upon the feedback of events that they've attended, trends in the industry, and that's something we wanted to get across to you today with the webinar, is just how the trends are going in the industry, speaking a little bit about the JP Morgan conference that recently took place that I'm sure many of you in the audience had attended. And then in addition to that, just getting Chris's thoughts on how the industry has changed, how meeting scheduling has changed, and some of the technologies that can be utilized in today's day and age to make that process a lot easier for everyone out there.
Well, let's kick it off, Mike.
So for the webinar today, we're basically going to do a Q&A session. We're going to ask Chris some of the questions that I've gotten from a lot of my clients and a lot of people that I've spoken to attending these different types of events. So as you can see on the screen, it's going to be covering some of these key topics: the most effective strategy for scheduling and managing your company's strategic activity, staying ahead of the curve with the latest meeting technologies, and then we'd like to get more on Chris's personal experience using BioPro Scheduler, which actually allowed him to schedule nearly 500 meetings at JP Morgan, which was the most in AstraZeneca's history. At the end of the presentation, we'd like to open up the floor to everyone that's in the audience to ask any questions that they have. So Chris, if you're ready to begin, I'd like to kind of go into our first question. I know a lot of the people that are in the audience today want to get an idea of how the scheduling process actually works at a larger company like AstraZeneca. And if you could highlight how it works possibly before the event, during the event, and then even after the event, and maybe use JP Morgan as an example of how that activity works.
Sure, Mike. I alluded before in my comments that over the years, the JP Morgan conference has evolved to become a very important business development event where large numbers of industry representatives go to look for strategic partners, licensing opportunities, even M&A opportunities. And I've been participating in JP Morgan since the mid-1990s, but really since about 2003 is when AstraZeneca became more active and more organized in participating in the conference. And over the next few years, the size of the delegation grew from an original 7 or 8 people into numbers significantly greater than 50. I won't give out the exact number, but such a large delegation that it became cumbersome and nearly impossible to schedule all the meetings that were taking place that required multiple participants across many different teams within business development, within the therapeutic areas, and different functions. And then you layer on top of all that the C-level executives who were in attendance and the need for executive engagement and scheduling for very busy C-level executives. A lot of work goes into planning JP Morgan. The activity actually begins usually in late October or early November when the first series of incoming emails to various members of business development or to the executive team come in. And these get turned over to a core group of 3 or 4 people who manage the scheduling at JPM. In the years past, it actually came to 1 or 2 individuals, and through the use of massive Excel spreadsheets with multiple tabs, we tried to keep track of the therapeutic areas, the different business development groups, preclinical, clinical, commercial teams. Then we have layered on top of that the small molecule teams or the biologics team, because in AstraZeneca and MedImmune, those teams were separate and operationally independent. And then, of course, as I mentioned, then you layer on top of that the CEO or the CFO, who also might be in attendance. Virtually an impossible task to do using just Outlook and Excel spreadsheets. And that's where the beauty of BioPro Scheduler, which I think we're going to be calling BPS for most of the phone call, demonstrated its worth. Some of you might know I live on a farm in rural Chester County out in southeastern Pennsylvania. And one of my favorite mottos is having the right tool to do the job. And indeed, BPS is the right tool to organize a large delegation attending JP Morgan. I'm going to pause right there, but for those of you who are on the call and are from small organizations that don't send 10 or 20 people to the conference, I think there's a message in here about the utility of the tool for you as well. So I hope you'll stay tuned and hear about the advantages that this tool offers for small companies as well as medium-sized biotechs or large pharma companies.
And that's a great point, Chris. That's something we do want to get across to the audience. We are focusing on AstraZeneca that does send a large delegation, but for full disclosure, our clientele, ranges anywhere from small biotechs, venture companies, all the way up to large pharma. So the system accommodates everyone across the board. And what I like to tell, anyone that wants to hear about BioPro Scheduler, there's no meeting or event that's too big or too small, and there's certainly no company that's too big or too small to have application for a platform such as this. And that actually leads me into my next question, Chris. I know we've talked a lot about the JP Morgan conference in particular, but for those out there that might attend other conferences, we have some listed here, ASCO, American Heart Association, DCAT, as well as some venture meetings and summits. What are your thoughts on the application of this tool or scheduling platform at events outside of JP Morgan?
Well, Mike, I'll focus my comments on clinical scientific conferences such as ASCO or American Diabetes Association or American Heart Association, where many of the pharma and biotech companies send significantly large numbers of individuals to those conferences. The key distinction between those clinical and scientific research conferences and the business development and partnering conferences that we're all aware of is the level of interaction between the industry folks and the academic folks. And having worked in that field for quite a number of times, I can tell you that it's kind of a challenge when you're attending the scientific meetings to get time with academic scientists, PIs, individuals who are there to exchange knowledge, but not necessarily there scouting collaborations with industry partners. So I think there's a utility for the system to be applied to those events as well. But specifically, sometimes the industry folks that are going to those are not necessarily the business development folks who have used tools before to organize their partnering meetings. And so I think there is some education that will take place. More and more, though, we are seeing that at both partnering conferences and scientific conferences, we are seeing those delegations populated by both disease area specialists as well as business development folks. So whenever we attend JP Morgan, a lot of the disease area specialists would come along. Same thing at ASCO, primarily attended by clinicians and researchers, disease area specialists. We're starting to see more of the business development teams to go there to scout opportunities and to talk with principal investigators or key opinion leaders about strategic collaborations, consultancies, and such.
And that's a very interesting point. That it's not something that's unique to your company. Speaking with other companies that are attending these events, they've come to us and said, listen, we've seen the application at JP Morgan. In addition to that, we've seen a trend in the events that we've mentioned, not only in the scope and the size of it, but in the activity that takes place during the events. And we discussed privately essentially the trend that there's been a shift in both clinical and scientific meetings. So I wanted to see if maybe you could further expand upon that thought, touching upon certainly how the business development and the different clinical and scientific teams now have a need to work side by side as opposed to working separately as they have in years past.
Sure. I think it's no secret to anyone that the strategy and the R&D organizations of large pharma and other companies are evolving with the times. More and more big pharma is seeking innovative science from academia, and they're turning to the clinical and the scientific and the research conferences to identify opportunities wherever they might originate. So this presents a challenge because of the depth and the breadth of the individuals attending those conferences and their familiarity with organizing discussions outside of a business development specific event. So more and more you have very senior leaders from R&D attending these meetings, And they might be accompanied by mid-level business development folks who are trying to organize interactions with the key opinion leaders and the principal investigators. And again, doing this ad hoc, doing this with just spreadsheets is simply not an efficient mechanism. It's very time consuming because you're trying to coordinate the schedules of individuals who don't necessarily align with one another. They might be from different groups, different settings within a company, and we all know that they're try as hard as we can to break those walls down. There are silos within large organizations. So setting up scheduling meetings with important key opinion leaders who allot very little time to scheduling meetings with industry peers or industry counterparts. You need a quick and efficient way to identify the availability of all participants in a meeting, and that's what BPS or BioPro Scheduler gives you, is that ability to quickly identify time slots when everyone's available and can be scheduled to align with the very scarce time that KOLs would allot to that type of activity.
Yeah, and that's a great point, Chris. And this is something that I know I've heard from yourself and from a few other people that I've spoken to. Essentially, what I've learned is that the trend has shifted as essentially instead of having people working and scouting out these meetings, as you had mentioned, different people are working together. So they'll have a business development person and a disease area specialist working together. So as opposed to just scouting out these potential partnerships and collaborations, these meetings, the clinical and scientific meetings, have actually become decision-making meetings. So it really is essential for these companies to have all the key individuals in the same place at the same time, as opposed to in years past where it might have been just some scouting, going back to your colleagues, reporting back what you have heard. The business development and the disease area specialists are now working together in order to make a decision, go or no go, right on the spot.
Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest shift that I've seen, Mike, is the use of these meetings, both partnering conferences as well as scientific conferences, to identify potential partners where the discussions could move quickly, either to fill a gap in clinical pipeline or to align external resources with areas of interest in earlier preclinical projects, and having both the scientists as well as the business development person sitting at the table together with the external party can really expedite and facilitate that process. But getting those two people schedules aligned, it requires a lot of work.
Absolutely, absolutely. It does take a lot of work and time, and we'll touch upon this a little bit later in the call, exactly how BioPro Scheduler could make that time anywhere from, usually a day to a few days down to a click of a button in a few meetings. Shifting from that thought and going back to a little bit on what you had said earlier in regards to smaller companies having application for this tool as well. I didn't want to alienate anybody on the call that doesn't work for a larger company and think that this is a tool or this call was focused specifically on managing large delegations. So what are your recommendations for people on the call today that might not be sending such a large delegation as say AstraZeneca or Merck may send to a conference like JP Morgan?
Well, I think there's clear benefiting and opportunity for small companies as well as the large companies utilizing an efficient tool for scheduling meetings. I think if you're a startup company or a spin-out company and you're an N of one and there's only one schedule to maintain, you probably can manage that on your own. But as soon as you've got 2 or 3 people attending an event like JP Morgan, they don't call it the circus for nothing, and I'll credit my friends at BioCentury and for coming up with that name, because that's what JP Morgan is like. I'm not sure if there's people on the call that have never been, but it really is a 3-ring circus. There's a lot going on. You've got the JP Morgan conference itself. Of course, that's invitation only, and I think it's sometimes confusing to refer to the second week in January as just the JP Morgan conference, because indeed a lot of people are out there, and many of them never set foot in the Westin St. Francis Hotel or participate in the actual conference itself. You've got all this activity taking place in suites and hotels throughout the Union Square area. That creates a geographic logistical nightmare for organizing meetings. And whether you're a small company or a large company, you'll quickly begin to realize that the process of arranging meetings between parties is continuous. I talked about it starting in late October and early November, but it actually continues right through the conference itself. And you never know when a meeting is set up and you're going to get a short notice that the C-level executive is going to be participating in the meeting. You need to be able to know exactly where all your delegates are, what their availability is, what would be the challenge if they have to step out of another meeting. And that's what BPS gives you, the flexibility and the awareness to do that. Whether you're planning ahead of time or whether you're scheduling meetings or adjusting meetings right while you're in San Francisco, the tool allows you to do that on the fly seamlessly and to do it with literally immediately to know exactly where your delegates are. And again, there may be only 3 people in your party, but it's important to know where they are and how fast they could adjust their schedules to participate in a meeting if a meeting suddenly becomes a high priority.
And that's exactly the point that I was trying to get across is, especially with these smaller companies, that their key goal is, meeting with a large pharmaceutical, a large biotech company, a venture company. When I speak to them, they do have the initial, drawback saying, we send 2 or 3 people, it's not that hard to manage, but there are scenarios, like you had mentioned, that why on site, if a CEO from another company wants to be involved in a meeting, how do you react to that as a smaller company? How do you get the key people from where they need to be to the meeting that's most important to them? And that's something that we could actually handle for you on the spot. And I'll certainly cover that later, but I wanted to stress that, to everyone on the call, that it's not designed for any particular type of company. It ranges anywhere from small companies, venture companies that use our services, all the way up to largest companies such as AstraZeneca or Merck. So it does have application across the board. It can be even more essential for a smaller company on site when they're trying to make these last-minute adjustments to a high-priority meeting that they need all the key individuals in that meeting at that time. The next question I wanted to go over with you, Chris, is, for those of the people on the call that are out there and they want to maybe get a real live example of how, BioPro Scheduler may have helped you in the past, how it worked recently at the JP Morgan conference, and maybe some things that you can now do with the tool that would previously not been possible had you not had a scheduling tool or platform in place.
Well, Mike, I think there's two really good examples that I could provide that the audience can probably relate to. The first one is, despite all the planning, the pre-planning that goes into the conference, many delegates leave open slots on their schedule so that they can plan meetings while they're there. They might hear a presentation of a company that is interesting enough to then arrange on the fly impromptu meeting. That meeting might involve several people, and I can tell you, when I go back and I look at the schedule of 500 plus meetings that we did just this January, there are very few of those meetings that only have one industry pharma participant. The vast majority of those meetings have 2, 3 people at minimum in them, and many of those meetings have 5 or 6 people in them, because again, we're trying to have high quality interactions where go and no-go decisions can take place. So the ability to plan these meetings on the fly, in particular this past January, we noticed that there were a lot of openings on Wednesday and especially on Thursday, but that was done purposely because people knew that they would talk with folks at some of the hospitality events, some of the receptions. They might bump into them coming out of a session at the biotech showcase that's also held in parallel to JP Morgan, and they would look for opportunities, and the ability to quickly identify a time slot where they can meet with a couple of their colleagues to talk to an interesting company that's maybe not been on the radar before, or maybe a company that actually made an announcement at JP Morgan and is still not and the asset may not be partnered. That's what the flexibility that the tool gives. I do have one criticism of the tool, and I think everybody will relate to that, and that is that once you do book that meeting, the tool's still unable to create a suite out of thin air when all the suites are fully booked. So we'll have to talk about that in the 2.0 version. That's always the biggest challenge at JP Morgan, is finding a private place to meet. But the one thing that if you've got an open room, the tool will be able to identify that, and you will be able to slot a meeting into a quiet private space as long as you have one available. Second message I'd like to share about a specific incident is whenever the pharma are out at JP Morgan, they meet with a lot of venture capital groups. And I'm hoping there's a few VC representatives on the call, because I know that with all your portfolio companies, you've got to juggle schedules. Whenever the presentation schedule comes out for JP Morgan, sometimes you have to shift and move meetings because you need to be in the presentation with your portfolio company. And pharma takes one of the most challenging aspects of JP Morgan for me personally was trying to make sure I had all the right people in a meeting with a venture capital group, that you had all the people who were interested in very specific portfolio companies, and they're trying to be efficient with their time, and we book a full hour meeting so we can cover those portfolio companies. But getting the right people on the pharma side into a meeting with a venture capital group without a tool to help is nearly impossible. And I would think on the VC side as well that you want to make sure you have the right VCs representing your portfolio companies, because you probably can't always have the CEO of that company participate. But if you do, and you're using this tool, then you'll know when to schedule that meeting at a time that would work for everybody. So let me leave it at that, Mike. If you want some clarity, I can clarify.
Absolutely, and what you've touched upon is really some great points, and it's not something that I found unique to your company. Working with all of our clients before JP Morgan, I could tell you that the amount of activity that happens on site during the conference is overwhelming. We track, how many meetings are taking place, and there's hundreds upon hundreds of meetings that are being rescheduled, canceled, moved, and shifted during the meeting itself to accommodate for people's schedules. And the feedback that I've gotten back from clients is that without a tool in place, making these adjustments would be essentially impossible. But with the flexibility that you get, having such a tool like BioPro Scheduler, it makes making these meeting adjustments as simple as a click of the button, and that's exactly what you touched upon, Chris. The next question I wanted to get across to our audience is, we've kind of touched upon your experiences at JP Morgan, and you mentioned earlier in the call that you've been attending the conference since the mid-1990s. So, you're as good a person as anyone to speak upon, the difference between using the quote-unquote old school scheduling techniques as opposed to a platform or technology such as BioPro Scheduler.
Well, even as recently as this past January, for folks that are not using the tool BPS, I can tell you I can observe it just as recently as this year as well as in prior years, and that is the ability of other companies on the outside to respond to our request to have a meeting. It's not exactly the easiest concept to explain, but I call this the in-process challenge, and that is people put holds on calendars while they're waiting to confirm meetings, and they're calling around to executive assistants all over the world to see if a calendar has been updated. So they're using Outlook or they're using an Excel spreadsheet, but before they can confirm a meeting, they want to talk to the executive assistant, make sure that that executive is really available at 8 a.m. on Monday morning, or has their flights changed, or have their arrival or departure dates changed. And with the tool, you can eliminate all of that administrative burden, because all the schedules are in the system, they're updated continuously, and when you book a meeting, when you offer a time, you know that everyone on your team is going to be available at that time. That's the concept of reducing in-process time from days and even a week or more to get a response from an outside party, to when they call with that time, you can instantly confirm your availability, your team's availability, and commit to that meeting. Down the road, if there is a challenge to that, once you've got all the people in there scheduled in the meeting, and I know you'll go through this in a little more detail, the system will show you all other available times, and all those folks are available to participate if in the event that a meeting has to change. But I'd also like to give one more concrete example, and that is when the CEO or the CFO of your company walks out of a room. He's just had a one-on-one meeting with the CEO of a biotech company or a very interesting technology company, and he says he'd like to have another meeting, and he'd like 5 or 6 of our senior executives to be available, and go ahead and set that up. And that actually happens quite more often than you would imagine. And without a tool like BPS, it would be extremely difficult to identify on the fly while you're in San Francisco a time when those other busy executives who generally have full schedules could be available. But the tool can tell you not only when they might be available, but if there's a conflict and one particular executive cannot be available, it instantly tells you who they're meeting with, and it can identify a substitute who could sit in on a conflicting meeting so that the executive could be freed up to participate in the meeting. I know that's a lot of words, and it could be cumbersome, but hopefully that gets the point across.
Absolutely, it does. And what I'm going to do in a few minutes for everyone on the call, all the different things that Chris had touched upon, I'm going to actually go into BioPro Scheduler quickly and show you how simple it is to make these adjustments on rescheduling meetings, making any kind of last-minute adjustments, and all the key things that Chris had pointed out today. One last thing I did want to get from Chris before going into that product demonstration and a little bit of an overview of BioPro Scheduler is to just ask him what was his favorite feature in BioPro Scheduler, and maybe how did it help you streamline the scheduling process at JP Morgan, and how could it be applicable to anybody else that's looking to schedule meetings outside of JP Morgan? We mentioned ASCO, venture meetings, American Heart, and things of that nature.
Well, I've already mentioned the fact that it reduces the end process time, but absolutely there is another feature, and it's called the reporting feature, that the teams from AstraZeneca and MedImmune really appreciated, because everyone wants to be efficient with their time. You want to have the right people in a meeting. You don't want to have too many. You don't want to have too few. You want to know where all your team is, and sometimes you want to know where all the members of your team are alongside knowing where the CFO or the CEO are, so that they can be dropped into important meetings. So BioPro Scheduler has this reporting system where it aligns all the meetings that a team has side by side, day by day, so you can see if you've got one person in a meeting, 5 people in a meeting, you can adjust that, and you can be really efficient with people's teams. And we would produce this schedule on a weekly basis, and adjustments can quickly be made to, if you've got too many people in a meeting, to drop somebody out and make them available for another meeting. And again, these just without seeing it on the screen or without having a full tutorial, which I know you're going to make available to participants at their request, you really can't appreciate the ease of accomplishing that task, as opposed to if you were using an Excel spreadsheet or just using Outlook. The ability to really be efficient with an entire therapeutic area team schedule that includes business development people, research people, development people, clinicians, disease area specialists, folks from strategy, maybe even a lawyer or two. You can line all those schedules up side by side and make sure you're absolutely have the right people in every single meeting, and not too many, and that you're not missing someone who would be critical to the discussion and achieving that go, no-go decision.
And I think that summarizes it perfectly. And I will, in a few minutes, be going into those different slides where I'll show you exactly what Chris is mentioning. But before doing that, I certainly wanted to thank Chris for going through those questions with us. I know for myself personally, and speaking with Chris over the past few years, he's been a really great resource, and I hope he was able to convey to everyone in the crowd today the change in the meeting activity, how it's evolved over the years, and then how technology is now available to accommodate your needs in order to make the meeting process scheduling that much easier for you. But before going into the BioPro Scheduler presentation, I wanted to open the floor to Chris to touch upon anything that we haven't covered today in the questions. Is there anything that you'd like to get across, maybe summarize regarding BioPro Scheduler or any other schedule meeting scheduling processes in general?
I think I can be pretty quick. We've covered a lot, Mike. I just want to stress that time out of the office attending meetings like J.P. Morgan is critically important to make the most out of every day, every hour that you're at that meeting. And we all know that work piles up while you're away and while you're traveling. There's only so much you can do. But having the tool like BPS really can make those meetings much more productive, much more efficient, and it's very difficult to put a price tag on the cost of not having the right people in a meeting when you're on the fly, when you're in San Francisco. And so BPS makes every interaction count and can help you find the right partner because you've got the right people in the room who can make a decision. And I think that pretty much sums it up.
It does, and that's a perfect description. So again, Chris, I'd really like to thank you for sharing your experiences with everyone on the call today. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to touch upon some of the different things we've done in regards to BioPro Scheduler, talk about some of the tools and features that made the J.P. Morgan meeting a success for AstraZeneca and Merck and the rest of our clients. So the first thing I wanted to stress to everyone on the call today is that BioPro Scheduler is not just tailored to the J.P. Morgan meeting. So what we've done is we evolved the system from J.P. Morgan as a request from many of our clients. And you can see many of the conferences listed on the screen as not something that we're actually suggesting that you use it for. It's actually requests that we've received from our client base telling us that, listen, we've had experiences similar to J.P. Morgan at the list of conferences that we have on the screen. And I'm sure you can relate to having these same kind of difficulties. And these are just a few examples of requests that we receive from clients. But again, there's no event that's too big or too small. We could apply the system to medical congresses, trade shows, internal meetings, any meeting or conference that you're looking to track the activity of your team members or your delegation. So the next slide I actually have to show you is going to be some screenshots of BioPro Scheduler. So this is the main meeting tool, the main book a meeting resource where you could actually go through and you could book the meetings for your team members. And it's a really simplified process that if you're a coordinator and you have confirmed a meeting, instead of having to go back and forth between spreadsheets, Excel, Outlook, we've integrated it all into one process for you. So everything that's in your site is already pre-populated. We do a lot of the work for you. So it's as simple as putting in the host, the participant, seeing your meeting availability, and then once that's all been confirmed, going through and sending the confirmation email. In addition to these features, what you could also do in this click of a button is include the Outlook invitation, both internally and externally. And then once this is done, everything is saved and it automatically appears on your delegates calendar. So the days of going back between spreadsheets and Outlook, those days are over with. With BioPro Scheduler, we could accomplish all those goals with one click of a button and have everything saved for you as a coordinator. The next feature that I wanted to go through was actually the ability that Chris touched upon earlier. There's scenarios that you might be looking to get multiple delegates into a meeting, and it's critical that all the delegates are there. In years past, Chris had mentioned that they have maybe 8 to 10 attendees they're looking to get into a meeting, and without a scheduling tool or a platform in place, something like this would take days, if not be impossible to do. With BioPro Scheduler, we've simplified this process by allowing you to pick all the key delegates that you need in a particular meeting and see their availability across the board. So you'll be able to cross-reference this with your suite availability as well as the individual's availability. So say, for example, you have 10 people that you're trying to get into a meeting. 8 of them are available. You'll be able to see immediately which 2 are not available. If you needed to get those 2 people out of a different meeting, it's very simple to reschedule them and put them into the meeting you need to see. And what we've even done is we make it easier. If you could look at the middle of the screen, we highlight for you when the suite is available, and then all your key delegates that you've selected are available. So you as a coordinator would just have to put in their information, and with the click of a button, by selecting the plus sign, be able to see exactly when they're all available and book the meeting through here. And again, once you book it, it immediately appears on your delegate's calendar. The next screen is our meetings dashboard, and this is really the place where you could track your central activity as a coordinator for your entire company. So Chris had mentioned the importance of not only tracking your activity before, during, but also after an event. This does that for the coordinator. It allows you to see what's been confirmed, what meetings have been canceled, if you need to go back to your team afterwards and report to them who you've met with, who are the key decision makers in the meeting. Right from this screen, you can see all your activity at a particular event. Another thing that this allows the coordinator to do is any kind of last-minute changes or adjustments that need to be made on spot, before the meeting, on site. You'll see all of these key coordinates are there for you. So you can reschedule or cancel the meeting if need be. You could change the location if that occurs. If there's a last-minute change in location, we could accommodate that. As Chris had mentioned, there might be a scenario where you need to get a key decision maker into that meeting. You could add that person into the meeting and it immediately appears on their schedule. You could send the confirmation email again as a reminder. You could change the host if you want to. You could send the Outlook invitation as well to the delegates that are going to be attending this meeting. And what this allows the coordinator to do, it gives them the complete flexibility to make any kind of last-minute changes or adjustments. And what we do is, because everything is pre-populated, if you were to make any changes, there's no need to cross-reference it with anything else. If you were to add a person, we're only going to allow you to choose people that are available at that time. Same goes if you were going to change the location or change the host. So if you were to do any of these last-minute changes, you could do it without having to worry about having somebody double-booked, having the room double-booked. The system does not allow for that. There's no errors. And I think Chris had mentioned to me after the JP Morgan meeting, out of the 500 meetings that they had scheduled, there's actually no errors that occurred as a part of our system. So everyone was where they should be at the right times, and any last-minute changes that need to be made were made directly through this feature. The next feature is actually the ability to manage your rooms, and this speaks a little bit further upon BioPro Scheduler and Jujama's commitments to our clients. As I mentioned, BioPro Scheduler is essentially a client-driven database. So with every client that we have, we're constantly looking for feedback and adjustments that can be made to the system to make the scheduling process even easier for them. So what we actually did as a request from one of our clients was create a page where you can manage all of your meeting resources at an event. And this is an example of what would look like, for example, at JP Morgan. So as a coordinator, if you're in a company where you're either the singular coordinator or you have multiple coordinators on staff, you could all access a centralized location where you could see your meeting resource availability. And you'd be able to know where you could book a meeting, where meetings are taking place, and then if you wanted to put a suite on hold for any reason, you have that option to do that as a coordinator. One of the key things that was asked for us, though, was the ability to actually swap rooms. So in a scenario that you're a coordinator and you might have one meeting resource that's larger, another one that's smaller, and you see that the smaller room is getting filled up and the larger room does not have as many delegates in it, with the click of a button, you could actually swap rooms. And it's not only going to update the rooms, it's also going to update your team members' meeting schedule and availability. So this gives you, again, an easy way of not only managing your meeting resources, but also making any kind of last-minute changes or adjustments to the meeting suite at any point in time. The next tool that we have that I wanted to cover is something that we've actually implemented most recently, and this is the ability to actually send meeting invitations out from the BioPro Scheduler system to anybody that you're looking to meet with at a particular event. So as many of you have known, people that attend JP Morgan may be attending the event on a separate, basically on their own. They're not attending any of the sessions. They're not attending any of the partnering. So what we've actually done is we've given our clients the ability to have a partnering system in place where there previously was not a partnering system. And it's an easy 1, 2, 3-step process. For example, if I was looking to have a meeting with Chris Yochim at JP Morgan, I would be able to send him a meeting invitation, which you'll see on step 1. For step 2, he would either be able to accept or decline that meeting with me. If he were to accept the meeting, he would then be taken to a live availability of my schedule at JP Morgan, in which he could take a look at and see which is a mutually available time for him. And it's as simple as selecting that time and then in step 3, confirming the meeting. Once that meeting has been confirmed by Chris, everyone that's involved in the meeting, including the coordinator, is going to be notified that that meeting has been scheduled. They're going to be getting a confirmation email, and it's automatically going to appear on their calendar. So no manipulation, no adjustments going to need to be done by the coordinator themselves to get this meeting on the calendar. The next feature is our reports, the reporting capabilities. So many of the people that are on the call are used to working in Excel, handing their delegates their schedules. And what this actually does, This is one of Chris's favorite features. It gives you the ability to see a side-by-side view of your team members along with anybody else in your organization. So Chris had mentioned a scenario where he might want to have the CFO available in a meeting. Well, all you'd have to do as a coordinator was pull the individuals that you wanted to see their schedules, and then pull the CEO's schedule next to it, and you could see, when he's available, can he drop into this meeting? As a CEO, does he want to pick a particular meeting to drop into? And I think Chris had mentioned to me privately that there's a lot of scenarios where the higher level executives might not want to be involved in the entire meeting, but they may want to be able to just pop in and introduce themselves at the end of it. This report actually allows them to get a full view of where they're at that particular time, and then where their team members are at that particular time, so that if they wanted to choose a meeting that they thought was important to jump into, they could do that at the drop of a second. And again, if you're trying to find anybody's availability for a last-minute meeting, you could do it directly from our report center. So you'll see if Nadia Daly is my colleague and she has a gap in this schedule, I want her to be involved in a meeting, I know she's open, and I can put her into another meeting immediately. We also have other reports that are available for coordinators that are listed on the bottom of the screen. And for those of you that are comfortable working in Excel or doing the actual handouts to your delegates, we have that available for you as well. So you'll see you could print or you could export to Excel any report that's in our system. So if you're comfortable working in Excel, you could log everything in our system, export it directly from the cell to Excel, and we'll do all the work for you without having to create your own spreadsheet. If you wanted to print your schedule or email it to a delegate, you could do that as well. The last piece of the puzzle to the BioPro Scheduler product as a whole is our mobile app. So the mobile app actually allows you to see your schedule on site during a meeting and make any kind of last-minute adjustments. It works in two different areas. There's a team member app that you'll see on the left-hand side, and then there's a coordinator app that you see on the right-hand side of your screen. So both the coordinator and the team member or delegate can have access to their live availability when on site. So say, for example, if you want to know where you need to be, if you wanted to add any notes in regards to a meeting, you could do that directly from the user side of the app. If you also wanted to see your colleague's schedule to know maybe this is a meeting I should be involved with, or where's my colleague at this time, he could be a key decision maker in a meeting, you could contact him or message him directly through the app, let him know that a meeting's taking place, find out where he's at, knowing that he's open, and get him into that meeting to make that decision take place. The coordinator side of it would actually allow you to do anything that's available on the mobile side or on the desktop version of BPS on site. So you could reschedule meetings, you could book meetings, you could send messages back and forth between delegates, you could take a look at internal and external contacts, and any kind of last-minute changes could be done directly from your mobile device. The last page that I wanted to cover with you is some additional features that we have in BioPro Scheduler. So you'll see it doesn't only cover the screenshots that I've listed today. It also gives you the ability to go into different features like team management, meaning you could manage your team's schedules, you can know who's at an event, you could see and block off times for them, you could send them their availability, you could send them their schedules. As Chris mentioned, the database is completely secure, so we have a secure contact database for all our clients to use. We integrate directly with Outlook, where we have both an Outlook integration where you could send meeting invitations to anyone that you confirm meeting with directly from our site, as well as a live calendar link where any of your delegates could download it one time, and anytime you make an adjustment in BioPro Scheduler, their Outlook schedule is going to be automatically updated. The message center allows you to go back and forth if you wanted to message another coordinator or delegate. We have a reception module if you're looking to manage any kind of a reception that you're holding at an event, whether it be a formal reception, a cocktail hour. You could send invitations from our system, you could track who's responded, and we'll do all the branding for you. And the last piece of the puzzle is our customer support. We support our customers 100% in the process. We do any kind of changes, adjustments, we're constantly evolving the system. And I like to view our customers not as customers or clients, but more as partners as part of the process with us. So, without the people that we have working with, the system wouldn't evolve in the way that it is. And we continue to evolve just based on the partnerships that we've developed with Chris and our other key clients that we're working with today. So what I'd like to do is give everyone that's on the call an opportunity to schedule a live demonstration or call with myself where we could talk more in specific about your company, your needs, if there's anything you wanted to ask me personally in regards to the size of the delegation that you send, the meetings that you're going through. We've given you the ability to do that. and we want to basically leave this rest of the time open for any kind of Q&A session. And I know we're kind of going a little late on time, so I'm happy to stay on the call with anybody else that wants to answer any kind of questions. I know we have some questions coming in for both myself and Chris, so that anyone that wants to stay on the call, certainly feel free to stay on and we'll answer any questions. For those of you that were not able to get your questions, I'll personally email you back any answers that you had sent to me during the chat again. So, Chris, again, we want to thank you before we get into the question and answer session, and let anybody else that's on the call, thank you for being part of it as well.
My pleasure, Mike, and I can hang on for a few minutes as well.
Perfect. One of the questions we actually got was, how does the mobile app work on site? So the mobile app is given to delegates where they work on site, where they could actually view their personal schedules alongside their colleagues' schedules. So say, for example, you're at an event, you want to see where not only yourself is at that time, but where your colleague is at. The system allows for you to do that, and the mobile app allows you to track that in real time. So if you're a coordinator and you're trying to get a last-minute meeting scheduled, you would schedule that within BioPro Scheduler, and then as soon as it's scheduled in the system, it automatically appears in real time on the mobile app. So that's used specifically on site, and we've also added the coordinator portion of that, where they could do any kind of scheduling or rescheduling with their meetings on site with the mobile device. The next question I wanted to address was, what is the pricing model for BioPro Scheduler? So I'm sure many of you on the call are curious as to what our pricing model looks like, and it varies from company to company. So as I mentioned, we work with anywhere from large, mid, small tier companies, venture finance, and service providers. So the price could range anywhere from $2,500 to $25,000 based on your company's requirements. And what I'd like to do with you after the call is I'm going to reach out to everybody personally and address this on a case-by-case basis, where we could speak more upon your needs, your requirements, to give you a more accurate price, because I know that's a little bit broad in range. Another question that we received from our panel would be, basically, what does BioPro Scheduler look like if it were to be a yearly meeting portal as opposed to just a single event as JP Morgan? So what we do is each client works on a separate basis. So some clients use it for single events, where we build out a system based on their requirements, and the rest of our clients use it as a yearly meeting portal, essentially giving them access to the tool for the year, using it to manage as many events as they want to use it for that entire year. And what we could do is we could give different levels of access to the different people that are coordinating those events for you. So say, for example, you're attending JP Morgan and ASCO. You'll have a coordinator for JP Morgan and a coordinator for ASCO, if that was the case. We would give each of them logins individually, where they could actually go in and they could manage their own events, housing all of your main meeting and data under one central meeting portal. So your company would have a meeting portal, and then as each individual event gets logged into our system, what it actually allows you to do is it allows you to assign levels of access to those coordinators, allowing them to coordinate and manage each individual event. And I think based on time, we're going to cover one last question. And this is something that I received from a venture finance company. They asked me basically, Mike, I'm representing multiple companies. Does each company need to have their own BPS platform, or could they all be managed through one centralized platform? And the answer to that question is it can be done in either fashion. For those of you that want to have a separate site for each of your clients, we could certainly build that and accommodate that for you. But what you could also do is you could manage all of your clients under one centralized BioPro Scheduler platform in which each of your clients are represented, and you could schedule meetings individually. In the case where there's sensitive data that might be sensitive to one company or another, you as the person that's managing this account could have it marked as private. So say, for example, if I'm working for company A and I'm logging into your system, I won't be able to see any information that's scheduled or managed through company B. And the same would go for company B. So if you wanted to manage them under one central location, we could accommodate that for you. If you wanted to have each company have their own individual site, and you felt that they had a meeting need that they would have, multiple users, multiple meetings being scheduled, we could accommodate that for you as well. So the system is fully capable of managing and scheduling your meetings in any way that's possible. Again, that's the last question we're going to have time to cover today. I do have a list of questions that I received from the attendees, and what I'll do is I'm actually going to go through and I'm going to address them all to you individually. So anything that goes on with any kind of questions that you wanted to get answered, I'm going to reach out to each of you individually. I know Chris has offered the ability to reach out to him as well. So I will address all your questions individually, and I plan to introduce myself to each one of you personally. So again, I'd like to thank Chris, and I'd like to thank everyone in our audience today for joining us on our call, and I hope it was helpful in learning about meeting scheduling and the technologies that are out there today.